Hello friends, welcome back to Bio for Life classes. In this video, we are going to start our chapter 8 of class 11th biology, that is cell, the unit of life. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a series of videos for this topic, and in this video we are going to limit ourselves only to the first 3 topics which are being shown on your screen right now. So basically in this chapter the topics are: what is a cell? There is a basic introduction about a cell, then who gives the cell theory and what is being written in the cell theory, then different types of cells that are found all around us, the difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell, similarly the differences between a plant cell and animal cell, and finally we will be studying the cell organelles one by one in detail. So let's start. Number 1 is, what is a cell? We always say that cell is the basic unit of life. But why do we tell that cell is the fundamental structural as well as the functional unit of all living organisms? So if you see, this is the picture of a typical cell. Here you can see that this cell is having a boundary, an outer line, and within the cell there are many parts, and these parts are called cell organelles. These cell organelles are capable of existing, coordinating the function altogether, and therefore a cell in itself independently can exist and survive. And therefore we say that a cell is the functional unit of all living organisms. In case you also know, you must be aware of this basic thing, that similar type of cells, they work together, they form tissues. Similarly, tissues, a group of tissues form organs. Similarly, the organs form the organ systems, and many organ systems, when function in coordination, it gives rise to a functional organism. That is why a cell is called the fundamental structural and functional unit of all living organisms. Now, if a cell is if any organism is made up of a single cell, then that organism is called unicellular organisms. And if organisms like us, like human beings and many more others, they are made up of millions of cells, and therefore we are called as multicellular organisms. I hope this much is clear. The next is the cell theory. Alright, so when in many thousand years back, people from the scientific world, they started finding out, okay, what are the cells and what is the function, or the living organisms, what are they made up of. So there is one person which comes into the play, that is the Robert Hooke. You can see the picture here. So this person was working with a piece of thin cork, and he was looking at it through a lens, and what he observed was a honeycomb-like structures all over it, and he concluded that these small structures, they group together to form a particular thing. So he called these box-like structures as cells. So you need to remember, the Robert Hooke is the one who coined the term cell in 1665. Now, as the advancements took place in the lens, in the making of lens and microscope, then there is one person called Anton van Leeuwenhoek. He was the first one who observed a live cell under his microscope, and he explained it completely. So you need to remember two scientists' name very nicely. Robert Hooke was the one who coined the term cell, and Anton van Leeuwenhoek was the first person who described and saw a live cell. One thing you also need to remember, this study of cell structure and function is called cytology. As already I have mentioned in the previous videos as well, that you need to, whenever you study biology, you need to break the words and try to understand the meaning of it. For example, when I say cytology, it is made up of two words, cyto and logy. Logy means study. You put the word logy behind any word, and that will become the study of that particular thing. And cyto means cell. So the study of cell structure and function is known as cytology. Now, as people from the scientific world were attempting to know more and more about cells, they came up with the cell theory, and what we're studying at the end is the cell theory. So there's two scientists you need to remember is Matthias Skleden. He was a German botanist. In around 1838, he was working with plant cells, and what he observed that plant cells, all the plant cells are similar, and the plant cells are having the outermost layer, and that outermost layer is nothing but the cell wall that we call it today. Similarly, around that same time, like 1839, the other scientist called Theodore Schwann, he was a British geologist, and thus he was working with the animal cells. What he observed in the animal cells that the outer is a very thin layer, and that we call it today as plasma membrane. These two scientists, they collaborated their work, and they formulated the cell theory components. So they said, since they observed, one person observed the animal cells and one person observed the plant cells. So when they collaborated, they came to the conclusion that all living beings are composed of cells. And these cells are very similar to each other in chemical composition, and because of the components of these cells, they result into the metabolic activity of that particular organisms. So they were explaining that the difference between the plant cell and the animal cell is the plant cell is having a cell wall while the animal cells do not have a cell wall. However, the similar components and similar functions can be seen. While they formulated certain theory, they could not explain from where the cells are formed, how the cells are formed. So in 1855, there is another scientist called Rudolf Virchow. This person explained the cells are continuously dividing, cells divide, and new cells are formed from the pre-existing cells, and that is called omnicellulae cellula. So if in examination, if somebody is asking what does this phrase means, so you need to remember that omnicellulae cellula means these new cells are being formed from the pre-existing cells. They divide and they get converted into a new cells. So this part was added later and modified in the cell theory. So what in the end, if the examination it comes, what are the main components of cell theory? So you need to write these 4 points and you need to learn it. Number 1 is all living beings. All living beings, every living organism is made up of cells. These cells are formed from the pre-existing cells. All these cells are similar in their chemical composition and their metabolism. And whatever interaction activities, metabolic activities happening within a cell is because of the different organelles present within the cell. And therefore, this is how the cell theory came up. These are some of the facts. There's nothing much to explain in it. It is said that there are varieties of cells. The cells are having many sizes and shapes. They come in every things. So one is, you need to remember, viruses are exception to cell theory. The cell size can vary from as low as 0.2 micron to 20 micron. Micron is also known as micrometer, and that is 10 to the power of minus 6. It is calculated as 10 to the power minus 6. The smallest sized cell is that of mycoplasma, which is 0.1 micron, and the largest cell is that of an ostrich egg, which is 6 inches in diameter, including the shell. And the longest cell that we have is the animal nerve fiber, which can range from 90 centimeter to few meter. And as you can see in the diagram, there are varieties. You can see so many variations. Some are columnar, some are spherical, some are elongated, some are having branched, and so on. So this was only the warm-up session for the chapter that we are starting, and it is going to be a very interesting one because there you will be studying how a particular cell works. So in the next video, we will be studying about the prokaryotic cells and the differences between a prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. With this, we come to the end of today's discussion. All the best. Thank you.